Top 8 Most Dangerous Gang Members in San Quentin State Prison. The day San Quentin stood still, the sound hit first. A heavy, booming slam, like a metal door being kicked from the inside of the earth. Inside San Quentin's main yard, nearly 700 inmates froze. Officers on the tower leaned forward. The air felt tight, like the prison itself was holding its breath. At the center of the yard stood a single man. A tall, quiet inmate known only as Dheeraj. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't running. He wasn't even angry. But everyone around him backed away, forming a wide circle. Because in San Quentin, silence from the wrong person is the loudest warning of all. Dheeraj lifted his hands slowly, and the entire yard went dead still. He wasn't alone. 7 others, each from different blocks, different crews, different histories, watched him closely. These weren't regular inmates. These were the 8 men the entire prison system quietly tracked every day. 8 men whose names were whispered, not spoken. 8 men whose actions could shift the mood of an entire prison in seconds. That afternoon, something was about to happen. Something the officers feared. Something the inmates sensed. Something connected to those 8 men who ruled different corners of San Quentin. And as Dheeraj stepped forward, one officer whispered into his radio, "Control, we need immediate eyes on Yard C. The 8 are moving." Fade to black. The prison that watches everyone. San Quentin isn't just another prison. It's old, huge, and full of stories, some loud, some quiet, and some buried under years of concrete. Every hallway echoes. Every metal gate buzzes. Every guard knows that one wrong move can shake the whole building. The prison has different units. The main line, the yard, the cell blocks, the adjustment centers, the segregated units. But one thing is the same everywhere. San Quentin watches everyone. Cameras, towers, spotters, counts every few hours. But even with all that security, staff quietly monitor a small group more closely than the rest. Not because they want to glorify them, but because these men have influence, followers, and long histories that make prison life unpredictable if not managed carefully. By the time the story begins, every officer on duty already knew their names. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. These 8 men weren't powerful because of violence. They were powerful because of reputation, leadership inside their groups, and the way they could change the mood of entire housing units just by walking through them. From sunrise to lockdown, officers tracked who they spoke to, where they walked, what group stayed close to them, who avoided them, and how the entire yard reacted when they appeared. To new inmates, they looked like normal men. But to everyone who had been there long enough, they were the pressure points of San Quentin. The ones who could make the prison calm or turn it tense with just a simple gesture. And on the day our story begins, all 8 of them were awake early. All 8 were on the yard. All 8 were watching the same spot. Something was building. Something no one fully understood yet. But everyone felt it. The first name on the list, Dheeraj. The yard was quiet, but not the normal quiet. This was a heavy quiet, the kind that makes even new inmates stop talking and look around. And in the center of it all stood Dheeraj, the first of the 8. Dheeraj had been in San Quentin for years. People didn't fear him because he was loud or wild. They feared him because he didn't need to be. He walked slow, talked soft, kept to himself. But somehow, the whole yard always knew where he was. No one knew his full story. Some said he used to run with street crews in Oakland. Others said he came from Los Angeles. But nobody really knew the truth, because Dheeraj never bragged, never explained, never showed off. And that mystery made him even more respected. Why was Dheeraj considered dangerous? Not because of physical strength. Not because of anything extreme. It was his influence. In San Quentin, influence is more powerful than muscle. If Dheeraj nodded at someone, people paid attention. If he refused to shake someone's hand, the entire yard felt the tension. If he sat alone, others stayed back. He controlled his space without saying a word. Prison officials watched him closely because they knew one thing. When someone so quiet speaks, the whole prison listens. And on that day, Dheeraj wasn't acting like his usual calm self. He stopped in the middle of the yard, looked around slowly, scanning every corner. Then he raised his hand, not fast, not aggressive, just a slow lift. But that small motion made everyone nearby step back. Because that signal meant something, not to officers, but to the other 7 men. You could see it in how they watched him. Not scared, not angry, just alert. Almost like they were waiting for him to confirm something. The warning signs. Officers on the tower exchanged glances. They had seen small signs over the last week. Conversations lasting too long in the lower yard. Unusual movements between cell blocks. Certain groups eating together when they normally didn't. Whispered arguments in the chow line. More inmates watching the eat instead of minding their own space. To most people, these were small things. But in a prison like San Quentin, small things matter. And the center of those small things was usually Dheeraj. He wasn't starting anything. But he was always the first one staff watched. Because if he moved differently, it usually meant something was shifting behind the scenes. And today, he was definitely moving differently. He stared straight at the tower. Then straight at the officers by the yard gate. Then straight at the other 7 men. Something was coming. Something that would pull every name on the top 8 list into the same story. The second name, Mateo Quiet Fingers Race. While Dheeraj held the center of the yard, another man stood near the pull-up bars, calm, silent, and watching everything with careful eyes. His name was Mateo Reyes, but almost nobody used it. Inside San Quentin, he was known only as Quiet Fingers. Not because he did anything bad with his hands, not because he was sneaky, not because he caused trouble, but because he was fast. Quick at reading people. Quick at spotting danger. Quick at noticing things others missed. He didn't run any crew, but he was respected by many. Not because he wanted power, but because he had the one skill everyone in prison wishes they had. He could see things before they happened. Why did officers watch him? San Quentin staff paid extra attention to Quiet Fingers because he never wasted movements. He always stayed alert. The other inmates, especially the younger ones, copied his behavior. He had a calm manner that people followed without being told. He wasn't a leader on paper, but he was a leader in the way people naturally listened when he spoke or reacted when he reacted. And today, Mateo kept his eyes locked on Dheeraj. Not blinking. Not turning away. Just watching. Something was off today. Normally, Mateo stood near the edges of the yard. He liked corners because they gave him full vision. But today he wasn't standing back. He was closer. Too close. Close enough that officers noticed. Close enough that inmates whispered, "Why Quiet Fingers out here so early?" Mateo didn't speak to anyone. He didn't gesture. But his presence this early in the yard meant something was different. In a place like San Quentin, when the quietest man moves without explaining, everyone pays attention. The moment that worried staff. One of the correctional officers, Officer Jordan, a veteran who knew inmate behavior well, noticed that Mateo wasn't just watching Dheeraj. He was watching the other 6 men too. His eyes moved from Dheeraj to the far gate, to the bleachers, to the tables, back to the tower, then back to the center. Scanning, calculating, thinking. Officer Jordan whispered into the radio, "Control, be advised. Reyes is active. He's reading the whole yard." When Mateo Reyes started scanning, it usually meant something had changed. A small sign of tension. What worried staff even more wasn't Mateo's expression. It was the reaction of the inmates around him. 2 men who usually sat near him quietly got up and walked away. Not scared, just aware. They didn't want to be caught near Mateo if something went down. They respected him too much to stand in his lane. And that kind of reaction told officers that Mateo wasn't acting normal. Something was in the air. Something none of the inmates wanted to be caught in the middle of. Dheeraj noticed him too. When Dheeraj lifted his hand earlier, Mateo was the first to react. Not with fear, not with surprise, but with understanding. Almost like he already knew what message Dheeraj was sending. 2 powerful men, one silent and respected in the center, the other reading the yard from the side, were suddenly focused on the same invisible problem. And that meant one thing. Whatever was coming involved more than one person. More than one block. Maybe more than one group. San Quentin was now officially on alert. The third name, Big Terrence, siloed Morgan, while Deeridge stood in the center, and quiet fingers scanned the whole yard. Another figure appeared near the basketball court, a man impossible to miss. His name was Terrence Morgan, but nobody inside San Quentin ever called him that. To everyone, officers, inmates, even new arrivals, he was known as Tilode. Not because he was violent, not because he caused trouble, but because he carried weight inside the prison. Not physical weight, influence weight. If Deeridge controlled silence, and quiet fingers controlled awareness, then Tilode controlled presence. He was the kind of man people noticed even when he didn't speak. Tall, broad shoulders, slow steps, a serious face that almost never changed. He wasn't the type to show emotion. He just watched things with a steady, heavy stare that made people rethink their choices. And today, Tilode's presence meant something big was happening. Why was Tilode considered dangerous? Not because he fought. Not because he ran around causing chaos. Tilode was considered dangerous because people listened when he talked. Younger inmates tried to follow his example. He could calm a situation or make it tense in seconds. Officers could never read what he was thinking. He stayed connected to different circles without picking sides. In prison, the man who doesn't pick sides is sometimes the most powerful man of all. He understood how different groups operated. He understood how arguments started. He understood how rumors spread. And because he understood all that, officers always kept an eye on him. Tilode's entrance changed the yard. When he stepped out onto the blacktop, the reaction was immediate. 3 men stopped their basketball game. A few others stepped back from the benches. Some simply lifted their heads to see why he was out earlier than usual. Tilode didn't rush. He didn't act suspicious. He didn't walk toward anyone. He just moved slowly across the yard, heading toward the shadow of the gym wall. His usual spot. But today, he didn't stop at the wall. He kept walking closer to the center. Closer to where Deeridge stood. Closer to where quiet fingers watched from the edge. This was unusual. Tilode never moved toward the middle unless something serious was going on. The silent signal. At one point, Deeridge looked up. Just a small glance. Tilode saw it. Gave a tiny nod. Almost invisible, but quiet fingers caught it. One small nod between 2 respected inmates was enough to make the tower officers lean forward. Officer Jordan whispered, "Control, we've got movement." Tilode just acknowledged Ridge. Inside San Quentin, that wasn't nothing. That meant communication, connection, possibly coordination. And officers didn't like when influential inmates started syncing up. Not because they believed something violent was going to happen, but because the atmosphere could shift when those men aligned. The yard felt different now. With Deeridge in the center, quiet fingers scanning the edges, and Tilode moving closer, the yard wasn't just quiet anymore. It felt tight, suspicious. Sure. New inmates didn't understand why, but older inmates did. They had seen this kind of energy before. The kind that happens when multiple powerful voices wake up thinking about the same problem. And if 3 of the top 8 were active this early, the other 5 wouldn't be far behind. San Quentin didn't just feel tense now. It felt like a story was being written in real time. This was no accident. Something was brewing, and it would soon pull all 8 names into the same moment. The 4th name, Leon Icewater Grant. While Deeridge controlled the center, quiet fingers scanned the edges, and Tilode shifted the whole mood just by walking. Another presence stepped onto the yard. Not loud, not rushed, not angry, just calm, so calm it felt unnatural compared to the tension around him. His name was Leon Grant, but inside San Quentin, everyone called him Icewater. Why that name? Because Leon never reacted the way people expected. No matter how stressful the situation was, no matter how intense things got, his face stayed calm like cold water. No panic, no fear, no excitement, just steady. And in a high-pressure place like San Quentin, anyone who could stay that calm all the time naturally drew attention. Why was Icewater considered dangerous? Again, nothing graphic. Nothing glorified. Leon was considered dangerous because of emotional control. In a prison where emotions run high, anger, frustration, stress, worry, a man who stays perfectly calm has influence. People trust calm. People follow calm. People are scared of calm when they don't understand it. Leon talked less than almost anyone in his unit, but when he did speak, people paused their conversations just to hear him. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't threaten anyone. He just said what he had to say, and somehow it carried more weight than people twice his size. Even officers treated him carefully, not because he was violent, but because he was unreadable. Icewater's arrival made the yard shift again. When Leon stepped out of the building, the sun hit his face and he blinked slowly, as if he had all the time in the world. He walked with his hands behind his back, relaxed, almost casual. Inmates sitting near the tables glanced up. Some nodded respectfully. Others moved to the side to give him space. Leon wasn't feared. He was recognized, like someone with senior status in the prison world. When he looked toward the center of the yard and saw Deeridge standing alone, he didn't rush. He didn't tense up. He just tilted his head slightly, as if he was checking whether the situation was serious or just another day in San Quentin. Then his eyes moved toward the gym wall, where T-Load had stopped walking. The two men saw each other. Leon didn't smile. T-Load didn't nod. But there was a moment of understanding between them, a silent greeting. Only men with long history can give. Quiet Fingers reacts. From the edge of the yard, Mateo, Quiet Fingers, Reyes immediately noticed Icewater's arrival. He didn't speak. He didn't signal. But his eyes narrowed, just slightly, because Mateo knew something important. Icewater didn't come to the yard early unless something was happening. That was Leon's rule. If the day was normal, he stayed in the block longer. If the day felt off, he stepped out early. And today he stepped out early. That meant Mateo's suspicions were confirmed. Something was unfolding. But definitely. Officers take notice. In the tower, Officer Jordan saw Icewater approach. He held the radio close and spoke quietly. Control, the fourth one is on the yard. Repeat. Icewater just arrived. Inside the control room, screens lit up with new camera angles. Supervisors zoomed in, tracking movement. Not because they expected anything extreme, but because whenever Deeridge, Quiet Fingers, T-Load, and Icewater appeared together, the prison paid attention. 4 key figures. From 4 different housing units. In the same yard. At the same time. This early in the morning. That was not normal. Not for San Quentin. Not for any big prison. Icewater finally stops walking. Leon reached a spot near the long concrete bench. He placed one hand on it, looked around the yard, and slowly exhaled. He wasn't tense. He wasn't scared. He was simply waiting. Waiting for something. Waiting for someone. Waiting for a moment that the rest of the prison had not yet understood. And now, 4 of the 8 most influential men were out. Half the list. The atmosphere in San Quentin tightened even more. Story was building, and every inmate felt it in their chest. The 5th name, Raymond Lockjaw Pierce. The yard was now heavier than before. 4 influential men already in position, each standing in different parts of San Quentin, each watching, thinking, waiting. But when the 5th man stepped out of the cell block door, the entire atmosphere changed instantly. His name was Raymond Pierce, but inside San Quentin, absolutely nobody used his real name. To officers and inmates alike, he was known as Lockjaw. Not because of anything violent, but because of how he held his jaw tight when he was stressed or deep in thought. Whenever the right side of his jaw tensed, everyone around him knew he was calculating something. Lockjaw didn't start arguments. He didn't brag. He didn't try to show authority. But people recognized one truth. Lockjaw had a memory like a steel trap. He remembered every conversation, every face, every argument, every small problem that happened inside San Quentin. And because he remembered everything, He understood how situations connected. To prison staff, memory like that was a red flag. Not because it was dangerous, but because it meant he understood the prison's social map better than most officers did. Why was Lockjaw considered dangerous? Again, nothing graphic or extreme. Lockjaw was considered dangerous because of intelligence and patience. In a place where many people reacted quickly, Lockjaw reacted slowly and strategically. He watched. He listened. He analyzed. And when he finally moved or spoke, people listened because they knew he wasn't acting on emotion. He was acting on thought. He was the type of inmate who could calm a situation by explaining something simple everyone else missed. But that same calm intelligence meant officers watched him closely. Not because he was planning anything wrong, but because he could influence others. Without even trying, Lockjaw's arrival turned heads. As soon as he walked into the sunlight, his shadow stretched across the dirt. A few inmates near the wall looked up, then quietly stepped aside. Not from fear, but out of respect. Lockjaw wasn't loud. He wasn't physically imposing, but he had that look, the look of someone who always knew more than he said. He walked slower than T-Load, but more purposeful than Icewater. His eyes weren't on the yard. They were on the people in it. D-Ridge in the center. Quiet fingers near the edge. T-Load near the gym. Icewater by the bench. Lockjaw scanned them all, with his jaw slightly tight, a small sign that he was thinking hard about something. The officer's reaction. In the tower, Officer Jordan's voice returned on the radio. "Control, Lockjaw is on the yard. That makes 5. Control room responded. "Copy. Increase observation coverage. No interventions yet." They weren't preparing for chaos. They weren't assuming violence. But they were preparing for the kind of shift that happens when influential inmates gather in one place. San Quentin had seen this before. Not a riot, not a plan, not something extreme. Just a moment of alignment between people the prison took seriously. Moments like that could reshape the entire tone of the day. Lockjaw stops and looks up. Lockjaw finally reached the center walkway and paused. His shoulders relaxed. His jaw softened. He exhaled a long, slow breath. Then he looked up, straight at the tower. Not threatening, not challenging, just acknowledging. As if he knew the staff were watching, and he wanted them to know. He saw everything too. Then he turned his head and made eye contact with D-Ridge. No words, just another nod. More precise, more intentional than T-Load's earlier one. D-Ridge responded with the smallest tilt of his chin. Quiet fingers saw it. Icewater saw it. T-Load saw it. 5 men now connected. In silent communication. Across one yard. The yard feels even heavier. With Lockjaw now on the field, the tension didn't feel dangerous. It felt serious. Like something important was being discussed. Without any words. Like something bigger was happening. That the rest of the yard wasn't ready for yet. And as Lockjaw settled into his usual spot near the chain-link fence, everyone knew this morning wasn't normal. 5 of the 8 most influential men were now awake, alert, and tuned into something unseen. Whatever it was, the story was far from over. The 6th name, Jalen Paper Cut Morris. 5 influential men were already on the yard, each one standing in their usual area, each one acting different than normal. The entire prison felt it. Officers felt it. Even new inmates, who didn't know anyone yet, felt something unusual in the air. And then the 6th man stepped out. He wasn't tall like T-Load. He wasn't calm like Icewater. He wasn't sharp-eyed like Quiet Fingers. But everyone noticed him the moment he walked out of the building. His name was Jalen Morris. But almost nobody called him that. Inside San Quentin, he had a nickname that sounded harmless, but everyone understood exactly what it meant. Paper cut. Not because he hurt anyone. Not because he caused trouble. But because he was the kind of person who appeared small and quiet, yet somehow always found himself tied to the biggest situations. Just like a paper cut. Small, thin, unnoticed, but capable of changing everything in a moment. Why was paper cut considered dangerous? Again, nothing graphic or extreme. Paper cut was considered dangerous because he had a skill that prisons never ignore. He knew everybody, not just names, not just faces. He knew who argued last week, who owed who a favor, who switched cell blocks, who wasn't getting along, who had problems with staff, who had upcoming court dates, who was stressed or frustrated. He wasn't connected to trouble. He was connected to information. In a prison environment, information is power, and Paper cut had plenty of it. He didn't use it to start problems. He used it to stay safe, to help others avoid drama, and to keep the peace in his own unit. But officers still watched him closely, because someone with that much knowledge could influence attitudes without meaning to. Paper cut walks into the sunlight. When he stepped onto the yard, he squinted, shielded his eyes with one hand, and looked around carefully. He wasn't loud. He wasn't slow. He wasn't confident like the others. He walked with small steps, quick, light, almost shy. But the moment he appeared, 3 different groups of inmates paused their conversations just to see where he was headed. Not out of fear, but because Paper cut being early was rare. If he was outside before the normal time, it usually meant something important was happening in the prison. He notices the others, one by one. Paper cut froze for a moment when he saw D-Ridge in the center. Then he turned his head and spotted T-Load by the gym. His eyes widened just a bit. Then Icewater. Then Quiet Fingers. Then Lockjaw by the fence. 6 powerful presences, all on the same yard, at the same time. This early in the morning, Paper cut gently bit his lip. Not scared, just thinking. He knew this wasn't random. Something bigger was unfolding. Officers react immediately. On the tower, Officer Jordan raised his eyebrows when he saw Paper cut. He whispered into his radio, "Control, number 6 is out. Paper cut is on the yard." Inside the control room, supervisors leaned closer to the screens. They weren't alarmed, but they were officially on full alert. Never before had these 6 showed up early. On the same morning, without a reason. Paper cut doesn't approach anyone, but watches everything. Unlike Toad, Paper cut didn't walk toward the center. He stayed near the tables, just outside the main groups. He tapped his fingers lightly on the concrete, a habit he had when nervous or thinking. His eyes traveled from man to man. D-Ridge. Quiet Fingers. Icewater. Food. It wasn't fear. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. Paper cut understood that these men did not gather by chance. He also knew the last 2 names on the list would likely appear soon. And once all 8 were on the yard, San Quentin would feel the full weight of whatever was happening. A subtle shift in the yard. With Paper cut present, something changed. Not tension exactly, but movement. Inmates began sitting differently. Some stayed close to the walls. Others kept glancing at the tower. Some whispered quietly to each other. They weren't preparing for danger. They weren't expecting chaos. They were responding to the atmosphere. The presence of 6 highly respected men, whose moods could shift the behavior of hundreds. The yard was no longer just quiet. It was focused. Something was coming into alignment. 6 men out. 2 more to go. And everyone knew. The moment the 7th man appeared, the story would take its next step. The 7th name, Marcus Redband Hill. 6 of the 8 influential men were already on the yard. The air felt heavier now. Not dangerous, not chaotic, but charged, like everyone was waiting for something they couldn't explain. And then the door to North Block opened again. Out walked a man wearing a state-issued blue shirt, a clean white towel draped over his shoulder, and a red elastic band around his wrist. The item that gave him his nickname. His name was Marcus Hill, but nobody in San Quentin called him that. Inside those walls, he was known as Redband. Not because of anything violent, not because of anything extreme, but because of the simple red band he always kept on him. Nobody really knew where it came from. Some said it was from a family visit. Others said he made it himself years ago. But what mattered wasn't the band itself. It was what it symbolized. Redband was someone who held on to things. Memories. Lessons. Mistakes. Promises. He didn't forget much. And in a place like San Quentin, a man who remembers everything earns a certain type of respect. Why was Redband considered dangerous? Not because he started trouble. Redband was considered dangerous because of his influence on calmness. Where Icewater brought emotional control, Redband brought emotional balance. He walked into tense arguments and made them disappear. He convinced stressed inmates to think before acting. He reminded younger guys to stay focused, to avoid mistakes, to make choices that kept them safe. In a high-pressure environment, a man who can settle storms has serious influence. Staff monitored him closely, not because he was a threat, but because he had the ability to shift the emotional temperature of a whole housing unit. Redband's entrance changes the yard again. The moment he stepped onto the yard, a few men nodded at him, while others quietly cleared space. Redband didn't walk like a leader. He didn't walk like someone important. He walked like a man who understood the rhythm of prison life and knew exactly how to move inside it. He glanced toward the basketball court and saw T-Load. He gave a small nod. T-Load returned it with a look of acknowledgement. Then Redband looked toward the center and saw D-Ridge standing still. His eyebrows lifted slightly, a clear sign that even he knew. D-Ridge only stood like that when something serious was brewing. Quiet Fingers reacts immediately from his position near the edge. Mateo Quiet Fingers saw Redband enter the yard. Mateo didn't move his head, but his eyes shifted toward him naturally. He watched Redband with the same careful focus he used on the other influential men. Redband being early was a major sign. Quiet Fingers now knew, for a fact, this was not coincidence. Officers take notice too. In the tower, Officer Jordan saw Redband step into the light. He tapped the radio. Control, the seventh one just arrived. Redband is on the yard. Inside the control room, supervisors leaned forward. They weren't preparing for violence. They weren't expecting chaos. They knew what this meant. A major shift in the prison's internal mood was happening. When calm, respected, influential inmates start appearing early and gathering without talking, it usually means they are all responding to the same pressure. A rumor, a sudden change, a new rule, a movement in housing, something. The officers didn't know what yet, but the inmates did. Redband takes his place. He didn't join anyone. He didn't move toward any group. He found a simple concrete spot near the pull-up bars, placed his towel around his neck, and stood there quietly. But the way he looked at the yard, slowly, steadily, intentionally, told everyone he was thinking deeply. 6 men had already changed the atmosphere. But Redband's presence did something different. It grounded the yard, like a weight dropping softly onto already tight ground, like the final piece. Before something important arrives, only 1 man left. Now 7 of the 8 were present. 7 different corners. 7 different influences. 7 different histories. Surge. Quiet Fingers. T-Load. Icewater. Paper cut. The yard felt full now. Not crowded, but complete. Everyone, officers and inmates, knew the story was now one step away from reaching the moment that would explain all of this. Because only 1 man was missing. The 8th name. The final presence. And when he stepped out, San Quentin would finally understand why this morning was so different. The 8th name, Elijah Northstar Brooks. 7 powerful, respected, influential men were already on the yard. Each had stepped out earlier than normal. Each had taken their usual positions, and each had reacted in their own quiet way to the strange tensions spreading across San Quentin. Everyone, officers, inmates, even the new guys, felt it. The yard wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't dangerous. It was focused, almost like the prison itself was waiting for something to happen. And then, the final cell block door opened. The last man stepped out into the sunlight. His real name was Elijah Brooks, but nobody in San Quentin called him that. Inside those walls, His name carried a calm, steady weight. Northstar. Not because of anything violent, not because of anything extreme, but because he had a reputation for guiding people the same way. The North Star guides travelers. He was known for direction, guidance, centering people, keeping others from making mistakes. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't intimidating. But in a place like San Quentin, a man who could guide others, without forcing them, held a kind of influence that officers never ignored. Why was Northstar considered dangerous? Not for violence, not for threats. Northstar was considered dangerous in a leadership way because people trusted him a lot more than they trusted most folks inside. If someone was stressed, they talked to him. If two groups had tension, he helped calm it down. If someone younger was falling into mistakes, Northstar pulled them back on track. He didn't try to be a leader. He simply was one. That kind of natural guidance made him respected, and sometimes feared, because when someone like that is upset or focused, other inmates react without even thinking. And today, Northstar was focused. Very focused. Northstar steps into the yard. The moment he walked out, the late morning sun hit his face. He paused. Not long, just enough to breathe in the air, and look around the yard. With a calm expression. He noticed Deerage first. Everyone did. Then he noticed the others. Quiet fingers near the edge. Icewater by the benches. T-load by the gym. Lockjaw at the fence. Paper cut at the tables. Redband near the pull-up bars. Northstar's eyes narrowed gently. He wasn't confused. He wasn't surprised. He simply understood what this meant. 7 respected men were already out. Earlier than normal. In silence. In focus. Northstar knew immediately that something important had shifted in the prison. Officers react at once. The moment they spotted Elijah Brooks, Officer Jordan spoke quickly into the radio. Control, be advised. Northstar is on the yard. That's all 8. Repeat, all 8 are present. Inside the control room, supervisors leaned closer to the screens. They weren't alarmed, but they were fully alert now. The 8 men on that unofficial list were each known for their influence in their own peaceful, controlled, and respected ways. Seeing all of them, active, early, and attentive, meant the prison's mood was going through a significant shift. Not danger, not violence, just change. And in a place like San Quentin, change carries weight. Northstar takes his position. He didn't walk toward the others. He didn't call out to anyone. He didn't show anger or worry. He simply walked to a shaded spot, under the side of the administration building, and crossed his arms. From there, he could see the center of the yard, the tables, the gym wall, the pull-up bars, the entire open ground. It was the perfect vantage point for someone who preferred to watch first, then act later. Northstar's calm presence, combined with the other 7 men, created a strange new balance in the yard. Not dangerous, not aggressive, just heavy with meaning. The yard finally understands something is happening. With Northstar present, everything suddenly made sense. To the older inmates watching from the sidelines, this wasn't an argument. This wasn't a plan. This wasn't tension. This was alignment. 8 respected men, from different parts of the prison, had stepped out early, because they all felt the same shift. No words spoken. No signals given. No chaos. Just shared understanding. Even newer inmates, the ones who didn't know any of their names yet, could feel something important was unfolding. The yard wasn't normal today. It wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't ordinary either. Something was building. Something subtle. Something silent. Something that connected all 8 men into the same moment. And whatever it was, San Quentin was watching. Every inmate, every officer, every camera, all 8 were finally here. And the real story was just beginning. The yard holds its breath. All 8 men were now on the yard. Surge. Quiet fingers. T-load. Icewater. Paper cut. Northstar. 8 different lives. 8 different backgrounds. 8 different ways of thinking. But one thing was clear. They were all responding to the same invisible pressure. No one had said a word. No one had walked toward each other. No one had made any sudden moves. Yet the entire yard felt the shift. Even new inmates, who didn't know any of their names yet, felt the strange tension. Even officers, who had seen thousands of quiet mornings, leaned forward, watching closely. Something was happening. Something that didn't look dangerous, but didn't look normal either. The yard falls completely silent. The strange part was this. No alarms were blaring. No officers were shouting. No inmates were acting wild. And yet, conversations stopped. Movement slowed. Even the sound of basketballs bouncing faded out. Every person in the yard felt the weight of all 8 men being present. At the same time, San Quentin had moments like this before. Moments when powerful inmates aligned without planning it. Moments of shared tension, shared confusion, shared curiosity. Moments when something big had happened behind the scenes. Not violent, not extreme, but important. Something that affects mood, stability, and routine inside the prison. And today felt like one of those days. Northstar reads the yard. Holding his position by the wall, Northstar slowly scanned the space. He saw Paper Cut tapping his fingers nervously. Icewater staying calm, hands behind his back. T-Load standing firm like a statue. Quiet fingers analyzing everything quietly. Lockjaw watching with calculating eyes. Redband holding his towel and breathing slow. Dirge standing in the center, unmoving. Northstar didn't panic. He didn't assume danger. He simply watched. He knew the energy in San Quentin better than most. And today, it felt like the entire prison was waiting for a message that nobody had spoken yet. Officers try to understand the shift. Officer Jordan whispered into the radio again. Control, the yard's gone still. No movement, no noise. The 8 aren't interacting but something's off. Control responded calmly. Copy that. Maintain visual. No intervention unless needed. Supervisors zoomed in on each of the 8 men across different camera angles. They weren't looking for danger. They were looking for pattern. Any clue that explained why influential inmates were acting the same way on the same morning. This wasn't chaos. This was caution. And in prison, caution spreads fast. A whisper moves through the yard. Slowly, like a small breeze, a quiet rumor began moving from group to group. No one knew where it started. No one knew who said it first. But whispers always travel fast in places like San Quentin. The whisper was simple. They must have heard something. Not dangerous. Not violent. Just a sign that something behind the scenes had changed. Maybe a new policy. A shift in housing. A sudden transfer. A disciplinary change. A story from another yard. A misunderstanding. Or even a rumor that got out of control. In prison, even a small piece of news can ripple through the entire population. The 8 weren't reacting with fear. They weren't reacting with hostility. They were reacting with awareness, which made everyone else aware too. Dirge makes the first move. After several long seconds of silence, Dirge took a slow step forward. Just one step. But that single step made the entire yard pay attention. Quiet fingers noticed right away. T-Load looked up slightly. Lockjaw's jaw tightened. Icewater watched calmly. Redband breathed deeper. Paper Cut straightened up. Northstar shifted his arms. Dirge wasn't acting aggressive. He wasn't signaling danger. He stepped forward. The way someone steps closer to a situation. They need to understand. A step of awareness. A step of leadership. A step of intention. Nothing violent. Nothing chaotic. Just movement. The first real movement. From any of the 8. And that tiny motion was enough to confirm something very simple. The story was not random. Something had brought all 8 men out early today. Whatever it was wasn't dangerous. It wasn't chaotic. But it demanded attention. And the next chapter would reveal the first real clue about what was happening. When 8 men changed the mood of a prison, San Quentin has seen thousands of mornings. Some loud, some quiet, some chaotic, some peaceful. But mornings like this one are rare. 8 influential men. Deerage, Quiet Fingers, T-Load, Icewater, Lockjaw, Paper Cut, Redband, and Northstar didn't plan to come out early. They didn't send messages. They didn't form a circle. They didn't create chaos. They simply reacted the same way, to the same shift, at the same time. And that reaction changed the entire yard. Not with violence, not with threats, not with conflict, but with awareness. It showed something important. In a place built on concrete, steel, and routine, the real balance doesn't come from walls. It comes from people. From the quiet ones. From the respected ones. From the ones who think before they act. From the ones others trust to guide the mood, the energy, and the rhythm of the prison. When all 8 stepped onto the yard that morning, they reminded everyone, officers and inmates alike, that influence doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes, influence looks calm, focused, quiet, and sometimes, a single admin announcement can draw the attention of the most respected voices in the entire prison. Because inside San Quentin, every decision, big or small, ripples through the population. And the 8 men at the center of this story were the ones who sensed those ripples first. No shouting, no movement, no chaos, just presence, just awareness, just the quiet understanding. That change was coming, a change that would shape the days ahead and remind everyone inside those walls that San Quentin is more than a prison. It's a living system, a place where influence moves silently, where respect speaks louder than noise, where 8 men can shift the atmosphere with nothing more than showing up at the same time. This was their morning, their alignment, their moment of unspoken unity, and it was enough to make one of America's oldest prisons, even if only for a few minutes.